Okay, have you ever been in the middle of a speech and you get to that point where you need to mention a source? It's like this internal panic, right? You're walking this tightrope between sounding like you're just making stuff up and sounding like a robot reading a bibliography. Well, today, we are going to crack that code. We're going to figure out how to cite your sources so smoothly that you sound credible without ever losing your natural flow.
So look at these two extremes. On the left, you've got this statement that, well, it sounds okay, but your audience is thinking, says who? How do you know that? And then on the right, you have this monster of a citation that just totally kills the vibe. It's clunky, it's awkward, and it's just not effective. The real secret is finding that sweet spot right in the middle, and we can get there by following 3 golden rules.
So, our very first rule is all about quantity and placement, and I call it the Goldilocks principle. You know the story, right? You don't want too many sources, you don't want too few. You need the amount to be just right. And here's the core idea behind that. Your citations are there to be your backup singers. They're there to support you, the main act. If you use way too many, your audience starts to wonder, well, does this person have any original thoughts at all? The goal is to sprinkle them in strategically, right where they're needed most, to prove you've done the work without hiding behind it.
So what's the magic number? Well, here's a super simple rule of thumb to get you started. Aim for at least 1 source citation for every single subpoint you make. That's it. This just makes sure that all of your big arguments are resting on a solid foundation, which builds your credibility step by step through the whole speech.
And remember, this is not just about checking a box for your professor. Citing your sources is a total power move. Of course, it shows you're ethical, but it also makes you sound way more authoritative. And honestly, it even builds your own confidence, because you know your points are backed up by real, solid evidence. You're telling your audience, hey, I'm a pro, I've done my homework.
Okay, so that brings us right to our second rule. Because it's not just about how many sources you have, right? It's about how good they are. The quality of your research says everything about you.
This is so crucial. Your audience will literally transfer the credibility of your source directly onto you. It's like borrowed authority. So if you cite a really respected academic journal, you sound more academic and rigorous. But if you cite some random questionable website, well, you sound questionable. It's really that simple.
So let's break this down. On the left, you've got the heavy hitters, the kinds of sources that scream, I did my research. We're talking peer-reviewed articles, books by actual experts, government data. Now the sources on the right, they're not necessarily bad. They're great places to start your research, but you don't want to cite them directly in your speech. You use them to find the high-quality, original sources you see over on the left.
And hey, here's a little pro tip for you. Mix it up. Don't just give me a list of 3 websites in a row. When you can mix in a book, and then an interview, and then a journal article, you're subconsciously signaling to the audience that you looked everywhere. It just makes your research feel so much more complete and robust.
Okay, this brings us to rule number 3. And honestly, this is the most practical one. This is the one everybody struggles with. We know how many sources to use and what kind, but how in the world do we actually say them out loud without sounding like a clunky robot? It all comes down to the words you choose.
Let's start with what not to do. I want you to make me a promise right now. Erase the phrase according to from your public speaking vocabulary. Just get rid of it. It's overused, it's kind of lazy, and it just sounds amateurish. The good news is there's a much cleaner, much more professional way to do this.
And here it is. This is the secret sauce, the formula for a perfect oral citation. It's a simple 5-step process. You name the source, you use the past tense phrase, it was, you pick one of our special verbs, you add the word that, and then you deliver your paraphrased info. Trust me, this structure is the key to sounding polished and professional every single time. And step 3 of that formula uses this awesome little toolkit of verbs. Instead of saying said or talked about over and over, you get to choose the perfect word for the job. Is it a fact from a newspaper? Use reported. Are you explaining a tricky concept? Use explained. Is it advice? Use suggested or recommended. Rotating through these keeps your delivery sounding sharp and dynamic. Let's see it in action. For a journal article, you can see how perfectly the formula works. We've got the date, the journal name, and then our key phrase, it was explained that, and then boom, you deliver the information. See how smooth and professional that sounds? Now for a book, we just tweak the formula slightly. Since we have specific authors, we want to give them the credit directly. So notice we say authors recommended that instead of it was recommended. This puts the authority right on the experts, which makes your citation even more powerful. When you're citing a website, pay attention to that very first word, on. We say something is on a website, not in a website. It's a tiny detail, but it's one of those things that signals you know what you're doing. And from there, we're right back to our classic formula. It was described that.
And finally, my personal favorite, the interview. When you've done the interview yourself, you get to take credit for it. Using that little phrase, "she explained to me," highlights that you did original primary research. This is a huge credibility booster. You're basically telling the audience, yeah, I went out and got this information myself.
So, let's bring it all home. Becoming a master of oral citations really just comes down to nailing these 3 key ideas. Finding that just right balance, choosing sources that make you look good, and then using a smooth, professional delivery system.
So, here are the big takeaways. Remember the Goldilocks principle? Balance is key. Never forget the credibility check. Your sources are a reflection of you. And of course, use that smooth delivery system. And these last 2 are critical. Always paraphrase the information in your own words. Don't just drop in a random quote. And make sure you actually explain the information fully so the audience gets why it's important to your point.
So I want to leave you with this final thought. It's time to stop thinking of citations as this boring academic chore you have to do. Start seeing them for what they really are, a strategic tool you can use to make yourself a more confident, a more credible, and ultimately a more persuasive speaker. So you tell me, are your sources a burden or are they your secret weapon?